halls, a realm caught between shadow and substance, a place where echoes are swallowed by darkness before they even have the chance to fade. These ancient corridors stretch endlessly in every direction, their walls carved from dark, jagged stone that glistens faintly as if stained with memories that refuse to die. Strange, phosphorescent fungi cling to the walls, casting a sickly, ghostly glow, illuminating strange, shifting shapes along the stone. Each step here feels heavier than the last, as if the air itself bears a weight of unspoken dread. The silence is not a true quiet, but a deceptive stillness, occasionally broken by distant murmurs like whispers skittering just beyond Huning, brushing past but always receding back into the shadows. This place feels alive, sentient, as if it watches, listens, and waits. Ancient pillars line the vast hall, some crumbling, others strong and foreboding, each etched with symbols of gods long forgotten, stories too dark to recount. At intervals, statues rise from the floor, figures carved into poses of torment or reverence, perhaps both. These statues bear expressions of terror frozen in stone, their hollow eyes staring into the endless void as though they have glimpsed the horrors that lie beyond.
There are tales the people of the world tell children to keep them safe at night. Some speak of the cursed black lion that stalks the frozen peaks of Ilianth, of a cruel witch twisting dark magic in the mists of Scalia, and of a ghostly pirate king forever bound to the spectral seas. Yet even these are but shadows in the presence of a greater, more sinister power, the Dark Seraphim. Today, we will delve deep into the chilling history and physiology of this ancient entity whose influence threads through the darkest legends and the very fabric of despair itself. Our history takes us to a time when the hero gods were still in their infancy, a time when Terra IV was but a Pangeic landmass, a place where the lands were far more lawless than they are today.
Once upon a time ago, there was a tale people knew, said to have been the moment the world itself was saved from complete devastation. A great and terrible evil had spread its black tendrils across the very world and sought to destroy all that was good and just. A creature of great stature, said to tower over even the highest of buildings, 6 black wings that when unfurled would blot out the skies above. Terra IV was dying, and no one dared stand up against this monster they knew only as the Dark Seraphim, said to have been a fallen angel that had been sent from a vengeful god to punish us for our sins. But there was a conference of individuals from the different sects of the world, hailing from all walks of life, champions of the old ones, Dornalis the swift, Termina Trilenus, Brannus the sturdy, Noah the benevolent, Kuradash the indomitable, Sart the chameleon, and of course their fearless leader, Sir Curtis the pious. The beings who walked these harrowing paths all came from different walks of life, but came together for a truly painful journey together, filled with trial by fire, love, and loss. But in the end, their greatest desire altogether was to stop this Nephilim from destroying the things that they loved the most. But what they didn't know was the extent of the madness that had slipped through the entity, the great calculating lengths they had gone in order to ensure the absolute destruction of the denizens of Terra IV. Having found the power of the gods themselves, the Seraphim believed they themselves a god walking amongst men. using this power to destroy life and all that came from the good of this world. It was on the final days that the Brotherhood of Light had made their final assault, throwing aside proxy battles and soured negotiations. Coming to the Black Mass Castle that hung sickly in the night air, the heroes stormed the pinnacle of evil's castle and waged battle with the denizens inside, tired and worn out from the journey they worked so hard to get through, holding the love of those they left behind in their hearts. Great conflict raged on between the heroes and the Seraphim. No one knows what truly went on inside of that castle on that day. None except the noble heroes who put their lives on the line that fateful day. But on that day did we learn that the sun would shine once more for us, the common man of the world.
Where did the heroes go? Were they given a hero's return with food and praise?
I am afraid none of us know what happened to them. Some say that they were called upon for a greater purpose in life. Others say they perished that day, making the ultimate sacrifice for us all. Me? I believe they still walk among us, not as people, but memories in our hearts, showing us that this day is one that should be celebrated. Just like every other day forward, never take your days for granted. Always cherish what you have, because you never know what will come and try to snatch it away from you.
The tale of the Dark Seraphim is one interwoven with pain and woe. But with every story there is a beginning to it all. Who is this malevolent entity? Why did they seek to destroy all that this world saw as just and right? The answer may surprise you. In the beginning, the Dark Seraphim was no more deific than you. They became the entity that this world so feared. They were but a humble being like you or I.
To those who set eyes upon this book, know that these pages hold the events that led to my eventual demise. This is the summation of my life, my story, written for anyone who wishes to understand the monstrosity I became before becoming this. My earliest memories trace back to childhood, to when I was just a few years old. My mother was my constant. She was the one who cared for me through most of my young life. My father was a Nord by blood, a man who once lived high in the bladed mountain range with his people, but he turned away from his heritage to join the military of Crothage. Perhaps, in some strange way, this was his attempt at finding purpose.
As we hear this recollection, it's clear that the bond between mother and child served as a vital anchor in the stormy seas of a tumultuous family dynamic. The mother is painted as a figure of warmth and stability, a constant in a world that seemed to shift and churn with the winds of fate. Her care was not just an act of love, but a shield against the harshness of a father's distant choices. Now the father's journey is equally compelling, albeit in a different way. A Nord by blood, his heritage ties him to the rugged and unforgiving bladed mountain range, a place of enduring strength and resilience. Yet he abandoned that legacy, choosing the regimented life of the Crothage military. Was this rebellion against his roots? Or perhaps an earnest search for meaning and service? One can't help but wonder if this decision carried with it a sense of internal conflict, a clash between the man he was born to be and the man he sought to become. This dichotomy sets the stage for a deeper exploration of family, identity, and the ripple effects of choices made long before the Seraphim could understand them. These early details hint at the emotional and cultural currents that will shape his story. There's a tension here, a thread of unresolved questions that beckon us to listen further and uncover how these relationships evolve. How does one reconcile the weight of heritage with the search of individuality? And what toll does that balancing act take on those caught in its wake?
Yet, Mother paid little heed to his choices, and neither did I. There was one spring day in Durastia that still lingers in my mind. I remember the lush grasses I played in. It feels so distant now. I remember the sweet warmth of my mother's fur and the gentle touch that grounded me. I was an unusual child. I was often the last one allowed to play, long after the other children had been called home. For years, I wondered why Father didn't want me near other children. As I grew, I began to understand. Mother was my playmate, my guardian. She taught me the ways of the old gods, instilling in me a belief in their existence. She was a cleric by trade and the local physician, tending to soldiers who passed through our doors, patched up by her hand, either for carelessness or sheer stupidity. Occasionally, they met with my father to discuss orders. In his way, Father tried to show affection. When I was old enough to hold a sword, he took me outside and tried to teach me to wield it.
You're never gonna survive in the world if you don't pick up a blade. You're nothing but a coward.
There's an undeniable weight in these words, a bittersweet undercurrent that reflects the duality of the Seraphim's early years. On one hand, the image of a mother devoted to nurturing her child is both tender and profound. Not just a caregiver, but a mentor. She shared her faith, her wisdom, and her gentle strength. Her role as a cleric and a healer adds another layer. This was a woman who carried the burdens of others, yet still found time to guide her son with compassion. But then we see the contrast. The shadow cast by a father whose affection was distant and whose presence evoked fear rather than comfort. His attempts to connect, though perhaps sincere, were strained by his nature and the growing resemblance of his son to himself. That reflection, both literal and figurative, revealed something inescapable. The father's internal struggle projected outward as disdain. The dynamic between these two parental figures paints a complex portrait of the Seraphim's early life. On one side, a mother who serves as a beacon of warmth and guidance. On the other, a father whose actions and demeanor sow seeds of fear and doubt. This tension between love and rejection, nurture and harshness, creates the foundation of a story steeped in emotional depth and psychological nuance. And then there's the quiet tragedy of belief. The Seraphim, still a child, clung to his mother's assurances of his father's love, a blind faith born of necessity. But even this faith was fragile, and on his 7th birthday the illusion was shattered. The love he had so desperately wanted to believe in was revealed to be a hollow facade. This realization is a turning point, a moment where innocence gives way to a painful awareness of reality. These early experiences set the stage for themes that resonate deeply. The longing for acceptance, the shadow of familial legacy, and the search for identity amidst conflict. They also raise poignant questions about the lasting effects of such a childhood. How does one reconcile the warmth of one parent with the coldness of another? And what scars are left when the love you hoped for turns to rejection?
Yet, in truth, I feared him. His demeanor, his very presence, made me tense and uncertain. When I confided in my mother, she would defend him, saying he loved me as much as he loved her. I believed her. Blindly, I believed her. But on the day I turned 7, I began to understand that his love was nothing more than a feeble facade. The more I grew to resemble him, the more his contempt festered, a twisted reflection staring back at him.
There's an undeniable weight in these words, a bittersweet undercurrent that reflects the duality of the Seraphim's early years. On one hand, the image of a mother devoted to nurturing her child is both tender and profound. Not just a caregiver, but a mentor. She shared her faith, her wisdom, and her gentle strength. Her role as a cleric and a healer adds another layer. This was a woman who carried the burdens of others, yet still found time to guide her son with compassion. But then we see the contrast. The shadow cast by a father whose affection was distant and whose presence evoked fear rather than comfort. His attempts to connect, though perhaps sincere, were strained by his nature and the growing resemblance of his son to himself. That reflection, both literal and figurative, revealed something inescapable. The father's internal struggle projected outward as disdain. The dynamic between these two parental figures paints a complex portrait of the Seraphim's early life. On one side, a mother who serves as a beacon of warmth and guidance. On the other, a father whose actions and demeanor sow seeds of fear and doubt. This tension between love and rejection, nurture and harshness, creates the foundation of a story steeped in emotional depth and psychological nuance. And then there's the quiet tragedy of belief. The Seraphim, still a child, clung to his mother's assurances of his father's love, a blind faith born of necessity. But even this faith was fragile, and on his 7th birthday the illusion was shattered. The love he had so desperately wanted to believe in was revealed to be a hollow facade. This realization is a turning point, a moment where innocence gives way to a painful awareness of reality. These early experiences set the stage for themes that resonate deeply. The longing for acceptance, the shadow of familial legacy, and the search for identity amidst conflict. They also raise poignant questions about the lasting effects of such a childhood. How does one reconcile the warmth of one parent with the coldness of another? And what scars are left when the love you hoped for turns to rust?
Over time, the stench of cheap booze became a constant in our home. Night after night, I would fall asleep to the sounds of their arguments, anger and disdain filling the air. Mother suspected that father was having an affair but never spoke of it, fearing I might hear. Most days, if he came home early, he would toughen me up through so-called sparring, using wooden or dull iron swords. His strikes were harsh, calculated, and without mercy. Sometimes, his blows were enough to break bones. There were moments I feared he would be the one to end my life before it had truly begun. The last time I remember sparring with him, Mother had to step in. She was terrified that he might lose control, that he'd do something he'd regret. Some days, I almost wish he had. Those so-called sparring sessions, brutal and relentless, changed something within me. They turned my fear into a simmering anger. What began as a child's unease hardened into something darker, deeper. A quiet hatred that grew with every bruise, with every broken rib. The father I had once blindly trusted had become little more than a specter, one whose shadow loomed over my every moment. And yet, that shadow shaped me, perhaps more than I'd like to admit.
This passage paints a vivid picture of a household steeped in turmoil. where love and safety should have resided. Yet fear and conflict reigned instead. The stench of cheap booze, the echoes of nightly arguments, and the unspoken suspicions of infidelity create a haunting backdrop for the Seraphim's formative years. It's a stark reminder of how a fractured family dynamic can poison even the most sacred spaces. The sparring sessions, framed as lessons in toughness, are perhaps the most chilling aspect. What should have been moments of bonding between father and son became displays of calculated brutality. The father's strikes weren't just physical, they were emotional blows, reinforcing an atmosphere of dominance and fear. The description of broken bones and the looming threat of death reveals the deeply traumatic nature of these encounters. These weren't lessons, they were battles, and the stakes felt perilously high. The Seraphim's admission of wishing his father had gone too far is a profound and unsettling moment. It speaks to the complex nature of their relationship, a mixture of fear, resentment, and a yearning for resolution. Even if it meant destruction, this dark wish encapsulates the emotional toll of enduring such treatment, where survival becomes intertwined with a longing for escape, no matter the cost. But perhaps the most poignant line is this: that shadow shaped me, perhaps more than I'd like to admit. Here lies a raw truth about the lasting impact of trauma. The father's shadow loomed large, not just in the literal sense, but in the way it shaped the Seraphim's identity and emotions. Fear gave way to anger, anger to hatred, and hatred to a quiet resolve. A hardening of the spirit born of relentless hardship. As listeners, we're left to grapple with questions about the long-term effects of such a childhood. How does one carry the weight of a parent's failures? Can the scars left by abuse ever truly heal, or do they merely transform into something else? Resilience, or perhaps a darker legacy? These reflections remind us that stories like this are not just about the events. They're about the emotions, the humanity, and the strength it takes to survive them. As this chapter draws to a close, we are left to grapple with the harrowing truth of a young life fractured by pain and betrayal. The foundation of the Seraphim's family, once a fragile bond, has crumbled into ruin under the weight of anger and disdain. These moments, seemingly mundane in their cruelty, were far more than mere childhood scars. They were the forging of a soul destined for darkness. We have seen the seeds of rage sown into the heart of a boy, growing unchecked into something far more dangerous, a force that would one day change the course of fate itself. The critical moment that shattered the boy's innocence remains veiled, but its echoes are undeniable, reverberating across the realm and generations alike. What singular event, what unholy catalyst, transformed this boy into the Seraphim, a being whose very name would come to haunt the annals of history? But this is not where the tale of the Dark Seraphim ends. Far from it. Their shadow stretches beyond the mortal plane, beyond the realm we know, into places few dare to tread. The choices made, the paths taken, each one pulls us deeper into a story of power, vengeance, and destruction that defies mortal comprehension. Prepare yourselves, fellow wardens, for what lies ahead is not for the faint of heart. The tale only darkens from here, and the revelations yet to come may challenge the very fabric of what we believe to be true. Join us next time as we uncover the breaking point. The moment the boy became the harbinger of despair, a legend born of pain and an entity whose influence knows no bounds. Until next time, Wardens, stay vigilant, stay curious, and remember, the shadows have more to tell. If you've enjoyed unraveling these mysteries with us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our ranks. Your support fuels our path into the unknown, and together, we'll continue to guard the veil, keeping one eye on the stories that linger in the dark.
Look around this world so wide, dragons roar and wizards hide, forests deep with secrets old, legends waiting to be told. Castles high and valleys low, magic rivers how they flow. Join the quest, the journey's grand, mysteries at our command. Welcome,